And we are live. So let's see here. I'm going to check to make sure. Okay, so we're on YouTube now, and it says we're on LinkedIn. So I'm going to see if that is true. Nope, not yet.
There it goes.
There we go. Yep. So I'm going to mute. There we go. All right. So yeah, right now, and they have like a new little bar which tells me like how much juice I'm pushing out here. So okay, all right, okay. Welcome, everybody. This is Progressive HR Live. We are back now from a little 2-week break. We're here with Emma Roloff for Digital Transformation Part 2. Emma is the Senior Sales Executive for Navient. She's also the co-host of the Third Thursday, which happens every third Thursday of every month. And she is the host of Digital Transformation Talks. How are you today, Emma?
I'm doing well. I always laugh when I'm trying to explain what the Third Thursday is to people because it is like, oh, okay, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. I can give you the specific date, but it's a nice clear-cut name there, but I'm doing well. I think we're both in Verona. We've got sunshine and, getting close to 40, which to me means spring, so I wore my daisies.
I'm downstairs. I moved offices, so I'm downstairs in the basement now. So I'm still in my sweatshirts and my warm sweaters and warmer attire.
I feel like that's always kind of a risk of spring. You're either a little cold because you've gone and embraced it, or you have been the smart one that stayed with your cozy gear for a while longer.
You know what? It was like 55 yesterday, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was beautiful. I'm sure everybody that's like from a warmer climate is going to be looking at us like we're weirdos for saying that 55 is like the height right now, but in comparison to the -20s, I'm definitely appreciating it.
Yeah, it felt like summer to me yesterday. I was like, oh, this is wonderful. It's spring, it's summer. So hi, everybody. If you're just joining us now, this is Progressive HR Live. I'm here with Emma Roloff for Digital Transformation Part 2. Emma is the Senior Sales Executive for Navient, which is in Verona, Wisconsin. She's also the co-host of the Third Thursday. And as I mentioned before, Third Thursday called Third Thursday because it's on the third Thursday. And she is the host of Digital Transformation Talks. If you're tuning in right now, let us know where you're joining from, and we'll go right now to our comments and see where people are coming from. So Dr. Charlie says hello. So it just came off there. Dr. Charlie says hello. Em and I were having a nice conversation with Dr. Charlie in the LinkedIn feed today. Hi, Dr. Charlie. Where are you tuning in from, Dr. Charlie? Okay. And while we're waiting for others to, there he answered, Kansas. So cross country. Oh, goodness. Across the pond. Melina's tuning in from Sweden. Hello. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Malene, is that correct? So, all right. So again, while we're waiting, we're going to go to our first question. Oh, get another person here turning in. Oh, Dr. Charlie answered again. Okay, back to our questions. So Emma, what is the difference between digitization and digital transformation?
So this is one that I think a lot of folks maybe are getting confused, especially as we're looking at kind of what COVID has brought as a catalyst for a lot of organizations. When we were talking, getting ready for this interview, I mentioned this cartoon that I'm sure almost everybody who's joining us today has seen in one form or fashion over the last couple of months. And it's like this play on, what started digital transformation within your organization, and then calling out COVID as the catalyst for it. And I think that COVID has started the transformation for organizations or accelerated it for certain companies, but a lot of companies I think are maybe still in this digitization stage. And to me, there's a pretty big difference in digitization and digital transformation when we take a look at the types of processes and work that are being automated. So I think COVID thrust digitization on every single organization that maybe had resisted that change in the past. So things like starting to adopt Zoom or Teams meetings and being comfortable with that back and forth over video, or some companies that were really reliant on paper. I've had some conversations with folks that realized, like, when we got into all of this, like, oh no, we can't operate the way that we were before based on these new dynamics that are coming to us. And the difference between digitization and transformation to me is kind of the intent and the strategy behind those actions. So that quick knee-jerk reaction of, we need to take paper out of our process, or we need to figure out how to enable our team to work remotely, or in some cases, extreme cases, our team only has physical desktop computers and they need to be able to work from home. How do we get ready for that? I had a client that I was in their office as we were kind of hearing about all of the COVID stuff coming down, and I saw just like giant amounts of monitors being moved down to the lobby for people to take home with them as they were leaving. That is more of that digitization side of things to me. Digital transformation, a true transformation, is so much more than just the technology. There is levels of culture that come in, and I know we'll probably talk about this as we continue on with our conversation, but change management and innovative thinking and a really truly digital strategy for your organization, rather than just allowing for processes, and probably admittedly inefficient processes, to take place via a computer. So, we can digitize paper without transforming the process by just changing the mechanism of how we're interacting with that information. Transformation takes the stage of, we are identifying that the world is changing. The way that people are working is changing, and hopefully the future of work will look very different than it does today, even where we're sitting right now. So how do we start to set up a strategy that embraces technology and changes within our workforce and our approach to business to really create new ways of interacting with our customers, new user experiences for our employees in-house, and sets us up so that we can be really successful moving forward? I don't know if that's like a great, I kind of went on a bit of a tangent on the front end to talk about how COVID maybe didn't necessarily throw us over the edge with transformation. But I think I got to the root of the question there towards the end.
Yeah, no, I think that's, you definitely gave us a very good kind of definition between the two. And it's something that I've always kind of lumped them both together as like digitization and digital transformation. And getting to know you over the last few months has really helped me separate those and talk, knowledgeably to each one of them. So thank you.
And I think one thing I forgot to point out is this idea of, you can't get to full transformation if you haven't gone through digitization. So there is some like codependency between the two ideas. You can't transform your organization and still have lots of processes that are being managed outside of technology. And you can't rely on a lot of paper, but that's part of kind of prioritizing that strategy and making sure that you're taking those first steps to manage your information and processes effectively before you get to the real exciting kind of like buzzworthy AI and machine learning and the rest of it that kind of comes along as we start having these conversations.
Oh, thank you. Good add, Emma. Thank you. Before we go on to our next question, I'm going to go back to the audience and see where else we have people tuning in from. So, we've had a lot of people jump on. So Jody is saying hello from New Hampshire. 55 is a dream for them.
I'm glad we're not alone.
And then we have Megan Bickle. Greetings from Chicago. Hi, Megan. And Lisa Johnston is joining us from Wauwatosa. I love saying Wauwatosa. Just it's a part of your mouth. And then my friend Scrollin is joining from Glasgow. Hi, Scrollin. And Kara is joining from Madison, Wisconsin, just across the road from Emma and I. And then is it Dylan or Dylan? Dylan, I think, is joining from St. Louis. And of course, Tom Allen, woohoo, great to be here and tuning in from Birmingham, UK. Hi, Tom.
Hello. Lots of familiar faces. Glad to see you all here.
Yeah, so everyone, if you have any questions for Emma, please let us know in the comments. We'll be taking Q&A throughout this session. As I have my questions for Emma, please jump in, comment. If you say something that, or if Emma says something you like, just say woohoo, you know, and agree or disagree. Let's start a conversation. And any questions, I'll throw them up as they come through. So Emma, going to my next question. There's been a lot of debate on this, and I know we talked about this on the last part, the part one of digital transformation, is what's the difference between intelligent automation, machine learning, robot process automation, and the other terms used? And I know that you have a very specific opinion on this.
Well, my specific opinion is doesn't really matter is the number one question. And the reason I ask this is it is important to understand what tools are being used within your organization to enable the work that's being done. But at the end of the day, when you take a look at a business user sitting in their chair, do they really care what term Gartner is using to name the support that they're getting from these tools? And I actually saw an interesting post the other day that was kind of poking fun at this idea. It was the idea that everything is AI until we define it enough and it gets specific enough that it's given another name. So when we look at things like machine learning, there is certainly a difference between machine learning and robotic process automation. But then both of those concepts get rolled into when we start talking about intelligent automation. And intelligent automation starts to kind of pull at the strings of machine learning and natural language. It's this big tangled bowl of spaghetti, really, is kind of the easiest way of putting it. And when we take a look at some of these technologies, ultimately, robotic process automation is a tool that's getting a ton of light shined on it, and it's a really powerful tool. But even the definition of that starts to change as we look at how these software companies that are producing this tool are evolving. But at its most simplistic level, robotic process automation is essentially a little bot that you've got, whether it's sitting on your desktop or on a server somewhere, helping you complete really repetitive work. So I don't see him on, but Kieran, who we've both talked to and I work with on the third Thursday, he's my co-host there. He likes to talk about RPA being the clickety click. So it is a robot that you can train to go take care of tasks that are very repetitive, but they're not going to intelligently do that on their own. And that's where we start to get into this IA or intelligent automation space, where we're looking at tools that are starting to pull in these other technologies like artificial intelligence or kind of the more nuanced pieces like machine learning and natural language processing to help bring in more human-like decisions into your processes. So rather than always having to rely on a person to make decisions and drive your processes moving forward, we can start leveraging these other pieces of technology that are working towards mimicking the way that the human brain works. So machine learning, for example, is a type of technology that allows you to essentially train the tool that you're using. And it's usually, brought in with a bunch of these other tools, but it's training this tool how to recognize patterns and think through things the same way that a human brain would. So a great example of this would be in like a accounts payable scenario where you're getting a lot of invoices coming in. And these invoices are all different shapes and sizes from all of your different vendors. And traditionally, that's really hard for technology to read the unstructured information that's on that document. But when we start to bring in machine learning, it can start to recognize patterns as it starts to encounter these documents more and more frequently. So then the tool can say, okay, I know I'm supposed to capture information off this document the same way that Corrine would if she was sitting in that accounts payable clerk role. And it will say, okay, I recognize this logo or the way that this is, the address from this company and the structure and how they send these invoices in every month. So I'm going to get more and more effective at pulling that unstructured content off of the document. Some of the other things that come into play here are things like natural language processing. So looking at that same example, we humans have a really great way of putting information into context and also understanding the way that information comes to us by just experience. So on those invoice documents, we may have invoice number written out. Pretty straightforward. Some vendors may have invoice £, and you and I know that that means number, but part of how natural language processing comes into play is looking at how do we communicate and how do we use our language in practice and in context. And so that helps, again, these tools start to look at the information the way that we would to strengthen that. So again, some of those pieces kind of bubble up to that larger idea of artificial intelligence. But again, they've become more defined and more specific. And so they've kind of gotten their own name over the years. And then I promise I will stop with this specific definition in just a second, but I think it's one of those things that it takes a lot to kind of unpack. Intelligent automation, I think, is the biggest umbrella that we're operating under today. So anybody that's joined conversations that I've had in the past, this topic is kind of the catch-all. And this is where I think some of the additional naming is coming in within our industry. And it's really looking at how are we bringing some of these more clickety-click type technologies like RPA or workflow processes or case management tools and combining them with these varying levels of artificial intelligence to pull them together to start combining thinking and clicking to aid the humans that are completing these tasks with the organization.
Wow, that was a lot. And for those that are like, okay, what just happened? That was a lot of information. Emma did write a blog, and that's on the Navient website. Here is the link to the blog. I'll also put this later on in the live show notes in the comments. I have noticed that LinkedIn Live is now, or StreamYard is transcribing all of our conversations. So people may not see this link right away because this transcription is over it. So gotta love, that would be an example of a bot, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's all sorts of different, there's going to be some artificial, probably natural language processing in the background and all the rest of that kind of helping real time transcribe that.
So we have a wonderful question from Dr. Charlie. And he asks, how do we move through this transformation without losing the person-to-person connections that make up the human experience?
So this is something I'm really passionate about, and I know we were planning to talk about. So thank you for setting me up so nicely, Dr. Charlie. One thing that I say time and time again is even if we're looking at a digital transformation and the word digital is in it, ultimately, it is about the people that are involved in that process, whether that is your customers or your employees. And the ultimate goal of any transformation is to make the day-to-day experience for humans more enjoyable and take out the portions of our job that make us feel kind of like computers or robots in what we're doing and give us more time to focus on that person-to-person connection and make that human experience. So an example that we use pretty frequently is, when you take a look at a customer service function or a call center, or, almost every organization has people that are focused on that customer experience and making sure that it's as smooth as possible. When you take a look at the functions that those people are doing, there's a lot of information gathering when someone calls in so that they can get context of what's going on. There may be multiple systems that they're accessing information in, and there's a lot of multitasking when you're talking to someone on the phone. And when we look at how we can bring technology in to strengthen that customer experience and make sure that that person-to-person connection is there, it's aiding in all of the busy work that's going on the other side of the phone call that maybe you're not seeing face-to-face, and freeing up that customer service representative to have a human conversation with you that has critical thinking behind it and has empathy behind it and allows you to really enhance that human experience, even when we're looking at technology being a part of it. And that comes down to, you know, any type of technology that we're bringing in. The ultimate goal should be strengthening the experience and rebalancing the workload to make it so that you can focus on those human parts or focus on the exciting parts of your job. So, you know, Corrine, you and I talked about like having AI set up meetings for you. And, you know, a big part of my job as a salesperson is coordinating meetings, coordinating calendars, looking at all of the, you know, these different, and it might take me 2 weeks going back and forth if it's a big meeting with busy calendars. Think about what I could do with the time that I spend coordinating those types of meetings when we get to the point where we can trust and enable AI and, you know, these tools in the background to take care of that for us. And I know that there are people that are using that technology today, which is why I can kind of use that as an example. But that would free up my time to make sure that my clients are getting the person-to-person experience that they expect from me, or free up my time to think of new ways that we can help them. And, you know, the examples go on and on from there.
Yeah. And Dr. Charlie says, awesome, absolutely excellent, thank you. Echo that, Dr. Charlie. And then Ricky is just joining us now. She said, yay, the video finally loaded. I hope LinkedIn isn't having any glitches like it did last week for 2 hours. So thank you. Thank you for joining us, Ricky. Okay, so back to our questions. We talked a lot about automation and a lot of the definitions and the difference between digitization and digital transformation. So my next question is, how do I go about finding my options to automate?
So I think that there are a number of ways for organizations to do this. And sometimes that means that they've got in-house talent that are really great at finding these opportunities and leveraging experiences and business knowledge from people within the organization. I might be a little biased because this is what I help my clients do, but I think that there is something really, really powerful in bringing in somebody from the outside that has a different viewpoint and skill set to help you identify these areas that you can automate your process. And part of the reason that I say that is, you know, Navient, we have a team full of consultants that do this day in and day out, and they have experience from all of our other clients that they can pull from in how they've automated processes in the past, where bottlenecks occur, and they can pull from that knowledge base to offer recommendations to our clients. And that is going to be the case with consultants across the board. There are people that you can bring in that are strictly focused on, you know, the consulting and consulting only, all the way to people that are, again, doing full implementations of these solutions for you. But I think it's really important from whether it's somebody internally or from the outside that you look at the full process that is involved when you're looking for an opportunity to automate. Because I think sometimes when we take a look at these tools, we get really laser focused on trying to solve one specific problem. But things don't happen in an echo chamber, and you need to look at what are the steps that take place ahead of things and what are the steps that take place behind, like downstream from specific processes, and really rethink the way that you're doing the whole process to get the most out of your automation journey. And I think that's the thing that really is valuable with bringing someone in from the third party. They're going to ask you different questions. They're going to think about things differently than how your team would. And again, you can have, you know, kind of business analysts that are really strong and really good at doing this for your organization. I have some clients that have wonderful teams for doing this. I know we're going to talk a little bit about, Siri's listening to me. We have, a little bit of a conversation looking at Center of Excellence here in a bit, but that's part of the role for them as well, is identifying these opportunities and helping you figure out what that whole process looks like. And if I change this part, what happens downstream, so that you can get the most efficient process possible.
Thanks, Emma. And we have a question from Tom Allen. What are the most important questions that you need to ask your team, client, to understand what their culture is and if it does foster digital transformation plans?
I think it's pretty easy when you start working with an organization to understand their temperature, I guess, on digital initiatives and what that process has looked like in the past with them. Typically, it's just, you get into the conversation and you start talking about what their process looks like today, what other initiatives they have that are kind of high on their priority list. And those comments and those feelings are pretty well known internally, where they'll start to tell you like, oh yeah, the last time we did this, it was pretty bumpy. We had some trouble getting buy-in from the team. And so that's like a flag to me of like, okay, we need to make sure that we are evangelizing the solution appropriately throughout the entire process. And maybe that when we get into the implementation, they've got a little extra support when it comes to testing and training of the solution to make sure that it gets out of the starting blocks, right? And it's just kind of listening to small comments that are made here and there, at least from my perspective and my experience. Typically, organizations know like, oh yeah, we're a really tech savvy company, or like, our processes are lagging a little and this is maybe why. And there are also some industries that are just a little bit more hesitant or slow to change. And so as you get in and you start working on digital initiatives, you can kind of have at least an idea of what the perception is probably going to be on the client side. So that's kind of my thought. But again, it usually comes up in conversation versus like having to definitively dive into questions with the customer on that specific idea.
Okay, thank you. And Ricky had a comment, a full picture is essential when process mapping and looking at workflows. This is not limited just to automation, think optimization. Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome. I love everybody's comments, love everybody's questions, keep them coming. So my next question is, and I think this question is probably like my favorite of your answers, I would say. I have a lot of favorites, but I think this is my ultimate favorite. So if you can have one, what is your philosophy on change management and digital transformation? And we talked a little bit about that with Dr. Charlie's question. So.
Mm-hmm. This is the thing that I am most passionate about. And I talk a lot about change management and the role of the people side. And I think I've said it again, and I think if I'm still on LinkedIn when I'm 100 years old and I'm shouting about something, it's going to be change management in some form or fashion. I think this bleeds through to like everything in life, and just how can you manage transition and change is something that like as a parent, you're constantly doing this. When you're managing people, even if it's small incremental changes, as a leader, you're doing this all the time. And it just blends so well into transformation that, again, I'm very passionate about this. I think communicating openly, honestly, and often is the best thing that you can do to get the buy-in of an initiative. And for anybody that's listened to the podcast, I think this is a really universal explanation for anybody that's a parent. But I use the example of taking my 4-year-old to the doctor to get her flu shot. And I, unfortunately, kind of sprung it on her the night before. And I had forgotten that it was happening, and I didn't tell her about it. And she lost sleep the night before it happened. She was crying the entire way to the doctor. And the best way to explain it when we got in to get the shot was like an angry cat in the vet. She was literally like climbing up on my shoulder to like try and get away. And it was like an upsetting experience for everybody involved. Whereas if we rewind back to when she was 3 years old, I was much more conscious of communicating with her, communicating often and as much as I could to get her really excited about it. And we watched an episode of Daniel Tiger where he gets a shot for like weeks leading up to the flu shot. We talked about how much we love our doctor. We talked about what might be hard within the flu shot. And we talked about what she would get when she got to the end and made it through that. And then when we were there, we celebrated that she did it, and we called her dad on the Bluetooth so she could be excited about it. And I think that that's a really great analogy of how to be successful with digital transformation and managing that change. If you kind of just tell people like at the beginning, like, hey, we're doing some stuff, we'll let you know when it's time for you to get involved, and then try to like do this big kickoff and just like kind of put it in front of them and be like, all right, good luck. Like, I hope this goes well. And like, something doesn't go well, we're just going to kind of like pivot quietly and not tell anybody what's going on. You're not going to have success. Whereas if you go back to that example of like my Daniel Tiger prepping, if you have a culture of transformation where you're communicating openly and talking about it and getting people excited about the strategy that your organization has, they're going to be ready for it when the change comes to them. And if you involve them in the process while you're getting ready for the change and have them come forward with their thoughts on what that future state process should look like and have them contribute, by the time that you get to that testing and training component, they're excited. And throughout this entire process, if you're reminding them what the end goal is, why you're doing it, what's in it for them, they're going to be even more ecstatic when you get to the end. And they're invested in that journey. So if something goes wrong and you have to say, ooh, guys, something happened here, we're going to pivot, and you communicate quickly and upfront with them, you're going to be able to have their investment to solve it and find how you pivot. And they're not going to get angry that it happened, because they're going to understand that this is a transformation and it's a journey and that missteps might happen. And then when you get to the end, you can throw a big party when it happens. I have a customer who literally brings out a cake every time that they've completed implementation. And she does this with people, but like it gets people excited to get to that point, and not just on like the what's in it for me side of hopefully making their job better too.
Yeah, so I remember when we were going through an ERP implementation at one of my past lives in my past companies, and they got us really excited about it. We even had this like big contest. We were going to pick a theme, and the theme was like a race car going towards the finish line. And then it was a big celebration for who was the winner of the theme. And they're like, okay, we're going to implement this. And then 2 years later, everybody's like, well, wait a minute, weren't we supposed to have a new ERP? What happened? They're like, well, that failed. Okay, well, nobody told us. And nobody brought us along for the journey, only the journey of deciding on what the theme was going to be. And I guess that was the exciting part. But that's kind of like what not to do.
Well, and maybe there would have been a way to work around that failure had they brought other people into the conversation to think about how it was going to be accomplished. I've been on the side of a couple of places that haven't really managed the change management side. And it has failed. And it's not the technology. It's not the idea of what the solution was. It was getting everybody aligned and on board to actually get to the final crossing ground. And, it wasn't like, oh no, we're never going to do this, or the business need has eliminated. It's like, well, we can't align on this yet. So we're going to come back to it at a later date when we have more focus on the change management side. So if you don't do it right, it can be what like kind of sinks your initiative.
Yeah, no, definitely agree on that. And that kind of leads us into our next question. And this is a question that I've been quite interested in as of late, just because I'm learning more and more about this, is what are I'm sorry, I jumped a question here. How important are centers of excellence?
So I think I see Kieran in the comments as well. So he may have a slightly different viewpoint on this than I do. I think that it is incredibly important to have a group that is responsible for the success of your digital transformation. Do they need to be called a center of excellence? I don't know if that is actually going back to that naming idea. I'm not as caught up in the idea of semantics. But going back to Kieran, he's got a really great article series that pulled in from, tons of experts across the world on their viewpoints on the importance of a center of excellence in your intelligent automation space. And ultimately from that, the biggest takeaways that I have are the idea that if no one owns it, or if everyone owns it, no one owns it. So you need to have people that are invested in the success of your journey. And ultimately, you need to have somebody that has the authority to manage and govern your initiatives. So what that looks like, whether that's a specific COE called out within your organization, which I think is getting a lot of steam across kind of industry lines and different companies that are kind of taking on intelligent automation, or it is a collection of people that have kind of been identified within the organization under a different name or department name that are driving towards making sure that you're prioritizing your journey appropriately and taking on projects that are going to have value for the organization, and making sure that you are setting kind of an overarching strategy for the organization. And so I would encourage anybody that wants to learn a little bit more about this idea of center excellence, we can link it. I can come back and link it into the comments here later, but check out that series because there's a lot of tips and tricks on how to set that up and be successful with a center of excellence. But again, does it need to be named that? I don't know, but you need to have that ownership and that governance and prioritization if you want to be successful. So I think that those things are ultimately incredibly critical.
And so the one thing that I wanted to point out here, adding to Emma's comment, is that in my line of work, I do talk a lot with coaches, and center of excellence to them is that center of excellence within yourself, that you're the expert on something. And Emma and I and Kieran and Tom have all talked about this. It's like you don't have to be an expert on technology to be part of a transformation initiative or a center of excellence. So I wanted to point that out.
And that's actually a really good point to make, because I think for your center of excellence to be successful, you need to have a collection of diverse viewpoints. So people that are experts on the technology, but then people that are experts on the business. And like we talked about, people that are experts on change management, and all of these different things blending together. So it doesn't have to be, to your point, you don't need to understand the configuration or development that's happening in the background to understand the business drivers of why your organization needs to transform. And I think that those viewpoints are incredibly critical as well.
Yeah, no, and then that kind of leads us into our next question as well. And I didn't intentionally set us up for that. It was just something that was on my mind. Again, this is something that I'm also learning, is what are citizen developers, no code, low code?
Yeah, so we'll start with, I think I'm going to skip over citizen developers and come to the low code, no code piece first, and then we'll come back. So I mentioned, you've probably just heard me say code or configuration. To me, a low code application or a no code application is looking at taking the actual coding out of the dynamic of setting up a solution to start to automate your processes. And so when we look at like what is configuration and like how do you go about using these tools, it's going to be tools that give you the ability to choose from drop-down menus or use radio buttons and kind of like select things, as opposed to going in and coding in C# or any of the other languages that might be out there. It's going to give you the ability to develop solutions that come to actual implementation much quicker than having to build something from the ground up. So when you look at the value of these types of solutions, it's really looking at setting up a framework that allows you to get a solution in and start recognizing the value of that solution much quicker. Coming over to the idea of citizen developers, these are folks that have probably a technical acumen. So they might not be a coder, but they are comfortable with technology. They understand kind of the idea behind the processes that you're looking to automate, but they don't necessarily fall under an IT umbrella, or they don't necessarily live within your center of excellence within the organization. These would be, kind of other terms might be like power users of a solution, or, kind of that like admin role within a department that oftentimes we'll see. And so these are people that are looking to help accomplish digital transformation quicker without that coding or IT centric background that are wanting to kind of contribute to this initiative. And how these two kind of come into play is, obviously, if you don't have a coding background, you're not going to be successful building an application from the ground up using code. You're going to need to rely on some of these frameworks or these low-code, no-code applications to help enable you. The low-code, no-code stuff, though, helps speed up the journey across the board, whether you have your developers doing it or your citizen developers doing it. Because I had a conversation with CJ, Shige, there we go, sorry. I can send the link to the interview, but he had a really great analogy for low-code applications and how that works with citizen development. And he said, I'm not a chef, but if you give me a sharp knife, I'm going to be able to chop vegetables quicker than I could without it. Now, if you give that same sharp knife to a chef, he's going to be able to do all sorts of things with it that I could never imagine, but it's going to make him way more effective in the kitchen as well, the same way that it would make me more effective. So are your citizen developers going to be building your most complex applications? Maybe not. Are they going to be able to help you get your solutions in the hands of end users quicker? Probably. But the biggest thing, kind of going back to that idea of center of excellence, or whatever kind of governing group you have in place, that's going to be a really important thing as you're looking at citizen development, is making sure that you have some systems in place that enable this all hands on deck approach, but also help you set some guardrails up so that you all are successful at the end of the day. And so Kieran and I had a really interesting conversation third Thursday. So last week was 2 weeks ago, with Sydney Madison Prescott from Spotify. She literally just wrote a book on helping set up citizen developers. But she had some really great insights on how do you combat some of the challenges that come along with that idea as well.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go back and to listen to that. I thought I was on the last third Thursday. I'm not sure. I have to go back and re-listen to it then.
Well, afterward, I can just do a big drop of all of the links and the things that I think everyone should check out into the comments, so people can go, and I'll label them all respectively.
Okay, yeah, I love a person that has lots of resources. So what is your prediction for the future of work?
So I think there's so many different dynamics to this, but I think ultimately enabling technology and transforming organizations is going to hopefully make us all much more fulfilled and happy in our working lives. Going back to that example that we talked about a little bit before of certain things that I would like to offload within my day-to-day so I can focus on really high level activities, that's going to be the type of thing that allows us to start stepping out of the mundane, kind of boring parts of our job and really start going after these higher value tasks that allow us to feel much more fulfilled in our careers. There is going to be shifts and changes that we probably can't even conceptualize yet. One of the things that I talk about a lot is if I went back 50 years in time in my little time machine and I went and told my grandma, I'm going to, have a career that's built on intelligent automation and robotic process automation, she would have literally no clue what I was talking about. Even to the point where, again, if we went back 50 years and brought up the idea of social media, that wasn't a thing that was on our radar until it became a thing and careers started popping up as an end game from that. And so I think that there is so much potential of that future of work being something that we can't even identify yet. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing is there's going to be more fulfillment and more excitement towards value-driven activity within our careers and our day-to-day life. And I think the other thing that's going to kind of, we look at things like a 4-day work week or shorter work days. When we take out some of those mundane tasks and we rely on technology to do that, there's more flexibility for our employers and our culture to adopt some of these things that allow us to have more flexibility in our lives. So I think that is, if we're able to, if you're in the accounting department and you're able to close out your month end quicker by using technology, you have other time to focus on other activities, and maybe you can round out your day a little sooner than you could have in the past. And so there's tons of examples where hopefully automation coming in is going to aid in that. I like to talk about this little image I have in my brain of like a little robot and a person holding hands. I know Paula Carrero, who we had on the third Thursday, so you guys will see her as well when I link that. She has like her cover photo is her and a robot holding hands. And that is always one thing that I think about is it's this relationship of technology and people moving forward that I think is going to be a really exciting thing.
And what would you say to assure somebody that has a fear that a robot or AI is coming to take their jobs?
I think that there is the potential for automation to, I'm going to be 100% frank. There is the potential for automation to remove some jobs. Now, I think that the jobs that are being potentially replaced with a robot will be kind of balanced out by careers that are supported and created out of intelligent automation and this evolution over time. I think that we would be kind of remiss without talking about, we've gone through these types of revolutions many times before as a society, and we have found ways to be ingenuitous and figure out how to stay productive as a society. And I have all the confidence that history will repeat itself in that scenario. A lot of times when we talk about intelligent automation, it's called the Industrial Revolution 4.0, because we've been through this. And if you look at human history as a whole, there's been times where, we were completely responsible for everything. Including, picking every meal we had out of the field or off of the bushes or hunting it, to now we've got huge supply chains and all of these careers that have been created out of our society figuring out how to make the most of our labor. Now, does that mean that you won't need to upskill or train yourself or hone in certain skills to continue to be adding value to your organization? No, I think that that's something that all of us should be focused on a daily basis, is learning and growing and continuing your education and continually improving yourself as a person. So I think, in terms of if I had to give someone advice, if they're really truly fearful of that, is take a look at some of the soft skills that you bring to the market, like things like communicating and being able to add that empathy or that critical thinking or new ideas to an organization, and pivoting your skill set from that perspective, if that's truly something that you're fearful of.
I posted this morning that LinkedIn Workforce Confidence Index just came out, and they showed that there was an 8% increase in women pivoting to different functions, different roles, starting their own businesses. At 72% up are now 80%. And it just goes to show that we are all resourceful humans. And to your point, we can do anything. It's just got to take that who you are, that confidence, upskill, and decide what you really want to do.
Well, and I commented on your post because I'm somebody that pivoted pretty drastically at surface level. I went to school to be a social studies teacher, history, in fact. And when you look at that, that's not necessarily a perfect correlation to what I'm doing today. But I promise if I can learn this industry and all of its complexities and be able to untangle that bowl of spaghetti, anybody can. And, going back to that idea of citizen developer, low code, no code, my husband will tell you I get really frustrated with technology on a regular basis when my phone updates, but I've learned how to use some of those low code applications and those no code applications because it just takes a little bit of effort on the front end to figure it out. And the more of these conversations that I'm having, the more I'm realizing most people that ended up in IT or some semblance or just any career, the chance that the degree that they got or what they thought they were going to do growing up to what they are now, it's kind of that like coming of age of like, oh, nobody really knows what they want to do when they're 18. You have the opportunity to reinvent yourself and figure out what that looks like moving forward. And this just presents a really wonderful opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and I haven't been able to comment yet on your comment, but it's coming. But me myself, I've also pivoted too. I started. Somebody asked me like, "What did you graduate with?" And I Spanish linguistics. So I went from wanting to be a translator with the UN to business, to human resources, to now HR and technology. And when I did my degree, I couldn't even like, see, I'm not even talking, I couldn't even write a database. Like I couldn't even put together a DOS program. And here I am, learning and pivoting. And I think it's great. And anytime I get the chance to talk to someone like yourself and Kieran and just this group that we've put together, you put together for the AI journal, it's really important that we get out and we get outside of our industry and outside of ourselves to talk to other experts. So thank you. So on to my next question, and I'm looking at the time, so we've got about 10 minutes. So I really want to ask you, what question do you want to ask our audience?
So I think, and I can't remember what we prepped, but I think the biggest thing that I ask back to the company or ask back to anybody about their specific organization, because we've talked a lot about change management. And we've talked a lot about this like human aspect of digital transformation is internally, what are you doing to help bring your whole team along on this journey? And I know you and Kieran, and you've had a lot of these conversations about like, what is the role of HR or, the business in digital transformation? And I would kind of ask everybody else to like be reflective as an organization and think about like, what are we doing to bring everybody along on this journey? And, did we make the declaration of the fact that like, we're looking at new systems and we're looking at new processes and we are going to go towards digital transformation and this is initiative, and then that kind of stopped there? Or is there further communication, and are you tapping the thoughts and the viewpoints of all of the different diverse groups that you have within your organization to kind of start leveraging that diverse group of strengths to really drive your initiative forward? So that would be kind of my like thought-provoking question is like, what are you doing and maybe what could you do better?
And then Emma has also offered another resource, which is the Navient Digital Transformation Quiz. So if you're looking at different initiatives, go ahead and take this quiz. It might give you some insight into how you can prioritize those. As well, we have some comments here. Here we go. Ricky says, yes, upskilling and growing skills. I wanted to be a child psychologist, but...
I mean, if you talk to my 4-year-old right now, she wants to be a nurse, an artist, and there was something else in there the other day. And then mom always makes the list too, because she's going after my heart. But again, like a nurse and an artist at surface level look pretty different, but both of those things could somehow find their way into her future career. And she's only 4. So, there's always room to take your skills and figure out how you can apply them in a different spot.
Exactly. One of the things I said in my TEDx talk, I talked about my daughter and how, to your point, jobs are going to look vastly different 9 years from now. And she wants to be an artist vet. And you can say to her now, well, job doesn't exist, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to exist. And it doesn't mean that she's not going to be the first one to be in that role or create that position for herself. So I always say it's a huge possibility that she will be an artist vet.
I would actually be interested to see what that looks like, but who knows? A couple of years from now, we could be there.
I got a business plan going, so she's set on that track, kind of following mom with business plans.
Yeah, exactly. My husband and I are both in sales, and so we get a lot of negotiations and a lot of challenging back, and we're like, okay, so you're clearly working towards something here and you're a product of us. So
and Lisa said I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I did an internship in PR, and now she's in HR. So happy to have you, Lisa. So we've got about 5 minutes or so left. If anyone has your question, one question for Emma, now's the time. I'm going to go into the next question that I had prepared, and I jumped questions. So, oh, here we have maybe a question here. It is a question, but can I be a singer, learning and development? Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. In fact, Jinsey, I know two HR professionals or two HR professionals that have written songs about what they do. One is a chart topper. Yep, the payroll one's called the payroll song. And my suggestion is to look at Chad Beyer on LinkedIn. He has the Scrum Master song. So definitely, you can definitely be a singing, learning and development professional. So all right. So yes, last questions now. I am going to go to, I'm debating between these two questions because we have two questions. I'm going to go with this one. So what could our future transformations, digital and otherwise, entail?
Well, you've got just a couple. I mean, again, this is kind of going back to that idea of like the future of work and what could that entail. I think, so we're one more plug for the third Thursday. And I think I saw Kieran put it into the comments for our next conversation. We're going to talk about like intelligent automation and transformation today, tomorrow, and in the future, and talk about what some of these predictions could look like. And I think that there is a lot of ways that transformation could come into play. To me, the biggest area where I think we're going to see like kind of explosion in the next couple of years is how do some of the technologies that we're so used to interacting with in our personal life start to come into the business world. And like I say this as I'm looking around my house, I have like Siri started talking to me while I was like doing this live cast because apparently she thought I was, calling her out by name. But we do a ton in our personal life with voice. And I think that, from conversations that I've had with some of our software partners that are actively developing what that next evolution of business software looks like, I think we're going to start to see that idea of like voice come into the business world. And I have to be careful what I say out loud, I can name any of these devices and ask a question. I can ask what the weather is. I can have it order diapers for me. I can have it do all of these really crazy things just using my voice. And so I think that transformation is going to slowly start to seep into what we're doing within the business world. So saying things like, hey, such and such, please find me this document or bring up this contract with this vendor versus having to do that searching or that looking on our own. Or, I can do it with Cortana on my email now, but like, hey, Cortana, send so-and-so this email, and it does a pretty good job of it. But I think we're going to start to see that type of thing really explode in kind of that business world and start to shape the way that we're transforming. And, when you bring voice into things and that different level of just like a whole paradigm shift, I think that's going to change the way that we're approaching transformation pretty substantially within our business world. I'm trying to think what other things are like my big predictions.
AR, VR goggles, glasses.
Yeah. I think VR actually is going to be something that comes up. So Tom is on and he's doing an event later this month, the last Thursday of the month, with the AI Journal, specifically focused on AR and VR. I do not want to pretend to be an expert in this area, but especially as a previous teacher, I can see so many implications to that coming into the education world and how we learn about the world and how we interpret things. My girls and I spend a lot of time with, I don't know if you've played around with it before, but at least on my iPhone, I can pull up Google and like search certain animals, and it'll allow you to see them in virtual reality in your space. So you can, start to like, I've thrown down a giant octopus in our living room and then walked around and like helped the girls see that there's like a beak underneath this octopus and, doing that kind of stuff. Like I can tell them about it, but they're going to remember that. And my daughter asks to bring up the dinosaur on her phone all the time. So it's a different way of interacting with the world. And there's a lot of ways that will start to, again, bleed into how do we consume information as or like how I buy on Amazon is starting to change. The other day, I was putting a rug in my living room with VR. So that will start to, it's starting to come into the consumer side of things and how we interact with it in our personal life. I think it'll be a little longer before it fully comes into the business world, but I'm sure that there will be plenty of implications of that as well.
And I can imagine, I don't know if it's going to be 5 years, I don't know if it's going to be 10 years, doing progressive HR live as holograms with each other, having this big there, or, I'm not one for going into a VR space as an avatar, but I definitely think that like having a hologram and having this kind of cast to your living room and having progressive HR live talking with Emma Roloff in your living room would be great. So I do see that as part of the future.
And especially as we're looking at like, how do we manage events and stuff like that moving forward as the world changes, and hopefully we don't ever end up in a scenario like we're in currently or kind of coming out of, but that's going to change the way that everybody is comfortable with going to like big conventions and doing that kind of stuff. And that might offer another alternative of how to do it.
So we've got I'm going to go over 1 minute. I hope everybody doesn't mind. I've got some comments that I wanted to quickly pull up is that, let's see here. Tom said that here's the LinkedIn event to the AR and VR, and he tells me that Kathy Hackle might be joining. I'm not sure if I was supposed to let that out of the bag. Sorry, Tom. But then also he says that education with augmented reality, virtual reality is definitely going to be a topic. Make sure you're signed up to find out more. Awesome. And then one more quick one, Karen Martin says so many 18-year-olds go through what do I want to do for the rest of my life, this existential crisis, and they don't have to, we're all figuring it out. I'm still figuring it out at my age, I won't tell you what it is. But we have to spread the word. It's okay. You don't have to know what you want to do. So as we're summarizing really quick, everyone, that you can contact Emma Roloff via LinkedIn DM. And Emma, great response time. And you can follow me or DM me if you're connected, Creedwood Mahalbeck and Progressive HR on LinkedIn. Our hashtag is Resourceful Humans. Coming up, so next week we have Dr. Adam Hickman coming in from Gallup, and he's going to be talking about workforce insights. A lot of his studies. He's a senior content manager. Sorry, I didn't say that right. He's a senior workplace insights manager. So he'll be giving us a lot of interesting information. And then Chris Barkas, the COO of Tactic, will be coming in and doing a demo about their hybrid workforce technology, which is super interesting. So this is something that I said that everybody should join. And then we talked about voice technology. Nick Myers from Red Fox AI is coming in to talk about voice technology in healthcare. And that's going to be in April after our spring break. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining. I greatly appreciate you taking your time out on a Thursday to join Emma and I in Progressive HR Live. And Emma, thank you so much for being my guest again. Thank you so much. I love our conversations.
Well, thank you for having me and everybody that contributed. And as I teased, I will go in and do some of the resources that we've mentioned. And some of these folks I've met just on LinkedIn, so please connect. I love to grow the network as we continue to go.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday and see you next week for Progressive HR Live. Bye.
Bye.